Hey guys, tonight we march with the kind of army you've never really heard about. Not one in polished armor or perfect lines, but a sea of mud-stained boots, cracked helmets, and eyes full of longing. You're not here to swing a sword tonight, you're here to walk the long road, sleep under the open sky, and feel the weight of weeks, even months, away from everything you love. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this emotionally intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? Drop your city and local hour in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your journey in the early 1300s, a period of frequent wars. Whether it's the Hundred Years' War between England and France, or a smaller regional feud between two stubborn barons in the Rhineland, it doesn't matter. You're a soldier now, sworn to your lord, pledged to carry your weapon across enemy lines, and to leave your family, your hearth, your farm, behind. You don't travel alone, though. There's a whole procession of men-at-arms marching with you. It's loud, it's muddy, it's smelly, and despite the bravado, most of the soldiers aren't worried about dying in battle. They're terrified of the empty nights in between. With no wife by your side, no one to speak your name softly before sleep, and nothing but the wind and campfires, a different kind of battle begins. One against silence, longing, and the echo of things you're afraid to admit you miss. You walk all day under an open sky. Your armor digs into your shoulders. Your boots blister your heels. There are times when you speak to no one for hours, not because you're unfriendly, because no one wants to admit how hard this is. Some nights a soldier sings, just one voice at first, something mournful, maybe a ballad about a maiden who waited, or a sailor who never returned. Others join in, not because the tune is good, but because singing drowns the ache of missing touch, the ache of memory, the ache of wondering if your child back home still remembers your face. Let's be honest, there's no such thing as emotional health in the medieval army. There's no therapist, no journal, no hotline. You carry your stress in your jaw, in the way you sharpen your dagger a little too often, in how you stare into the fire without blinking. The church tells you to be pious. Your commander tells you to be strong. But no one tells you how to stop dreaming of your wife's hands or your lover's laugh echoing down the halls of a distant manor. Historians still argue whether most men went off to war willingly or not. Some signed up hoping for plunder and glory. Others were just summoned, part of their feudal duty. But few were emotionally prepared for the long, quiet suffering of absence. By week 3, your world shrinks. You think less about the cause you're fighting for and more about small, private things. The smell of fresh bread, the weight of a cat jumping on your lap, the way your lover once reached for your hand under the dinner table. You carry those things in your heart like relics, and sometimes you whisper them into the air, late at night when you think no one is listening. But someone always is, a fellow soldier maybe, one who nods silently, because they've been thinking about the same thing. Sometimes those silences are broken in less poetic ways. A few men drink, a few start fights, emotional pain leaks out sideways, and in a medieval army there's no place for vulnerability. If you're a knight, maybe you're lucky. You have letters from home, wax-sealed, kissed, and perfumed. You read them 100 times by torchlight, tracing each word like it's holy scripture. If you're a peasant conscript, though, you might not even be literate. So instead, you carve your wife's name into the handle of your sword, or into your shield, because you need her with you somehow. Even more haunting, sometimes a soldier doesn't remember what their wife looks like anymore. They try to summon her image and can only recall her voice. They wonder if she's remarried, if she thinks they're dead, if she's praying for them, or forgetting. And that thought hits harder than any mace or lance ever could. In moments like these, the idea of the enemy seems irrelevant, because the real fight is to stay human, to stay whole, to stay loyal, not just to your Lord, but to the version of yourself that existed before the war. That's why in some armies, comfort rituals start to form, small routines that tether you to your past. One man wraps his foot in a piece of his wife's old dress. Another carries a polished stone from his daughter's garden. A third recites the same bedtime prayer every night, not because he's devout, but because he always said it with his children before sleep. They anchor you. They remind you that you weren't always this cold-eyed man holding a spear. You were once a husband, a friend, a person who had a laugh, a favorite food, a nickname. And maybe, if you're lucky, you'll be that person again. But tonight, you sleep with your back to a tree, sword across your lap, and a whisper of home fluttering just beneath your breath. The fire crackles, a horse snorts in the dark, and somewhere in the night, a fellow soldier sings about the one he left behind. You close your eyes, not to dream of battle, but to remember what it feels like to be held, because sometimes that memory is the only thing that gets you through the next day. Section 2. The next morning begins the same as every other, before the sun crests the horizon, before the dew dries, before your bones even have a chance to stretch. A trumpet wails in the distance, and the groan of waking soldiers rises like steam from a boiling pot. You don't speak, you just move. You've been doing this long enough now that waking feels less like starting over and more like pressing unpause on something that never really stopped. But after marching, drilling, repairing armor, and sharpening blades, when the night returns, something shifts again. You're back at camp. The day's purpose, whatever it was, is behind you. And now you're left with that strange and uncomfortable question that no one wants to ask too loudly. What do we do with the rest of ourselves? Because the war never really ends for soldiers. The external fighting stops, sure, but the internal war goes on all night. The one between discipline and despair, between loyalty and longing. And that's where camp life after sunset becomes its own kind of battlefield. Let's step into that moment. It's dusk now. The tents flap quietly in the breeze. Fires spark up in small circles. The men form groups, always the same loose clusters. Friends, brothers in arms, squires who grew up in the same village. You gravitate to your own. You sit on a log or a barrel, maybe on the cold dirt. You rub your feet. You check the stitching on your boots. You stare into the flames, not because they're beautiful, but because they hold still when your thoughts don't. Then the talking starts. Low at first, then louder. Someone makes a joke. Probably dirty. Probably about a nobleman's daughter and a stable boy. It's followed by laughter, sharp, short, a little too desperate. Not because it's that funny, but because laughing feels like breaking free, just for a moment. And here's the thing. There are rules in camp, both written and unwritten. The official ones are posted or spoken by a commanding officer. No fighting among men, no stealing from fellow soldiers, no firelight after curfew. The unofficial ones? Far more important. Like, you don't mock another man's letter from home. You don't ask why he's holding a scarf at night. You don't judge how someone copes, because everyone's carrying something too heavy to explain. That's how these soldiers survive. Together, quietly, messily. They build rituals out of nothing. They share songs, some sacred, some bawdy. One man carries a flute made of bone. Another knows how to imitate bird calls. Someone else is always carving something, always whittling wood with terrifying focus, as if smoothing away fear one splinter at a time. And then, of course, there's the storytelling. It always starts with, "You'll never believe what happened before I joined this army." And you believe it anyway, because you need to. Because those stories are anchors. They remind everyone that there's a world outside the forest, outside the mud, outside the endless marching and waiting and killing. A world where people fall in love and lose teeth and get drunk in taverns and fall off horses and marry girls with too many brothers. These moments, ridiculous and human and utterly unheroic, are lifelines. And sometimes, if you're lucky, someone breaks out a game. It might be dice or knucklebones, or a weird version of chess played with coins and pebbles. Wagers are made, laughs are louder, and suddenly the camp feels alive. For a few hours, you're not soldiers anymore. You're just men, just people, trying to stitch together some sort of sanity using the only thread you have left. Historians still argue whether these nightly camp rituals were essential or optional. Some say they were a waste of energy, distractions from discipline. But most agree, without them, morale collapsed. And collapsed morale? That kills armies faster than plague. There's something almost sacred about how these men protect their evenings, not just from danger, but from emptiness. A good story, a shared drink, a game of chance, these things aren't luxuries in war. They're medicine. And not everyone makes it to morning, emotionally speaking. Some men snap. They cry too loudly in the dark. They start fights over nothing. They scream names in their sleep. They wake up clutching the air like they're holding someone who's no longer there. And no one says anything the next day, because everyone understands. The camp is built on silence, noise, ritual, and pain, woven together in a way that keeps the roof from collapsing. You might not talk about what you're feeling. You might not have the words. But you pass the wine anyway. You toss someone an extra blanket. You hum along to a song even though you don't know the words. Because out here, that's enough. It has to be. And sometimes, just sometimes, one of the younger soldiers pulls something out of his pouch. A small, carved figure, a doll, a tiny horse, a locket, something made by hands that missed him, something given to him before he left. He doesn't show it often, he doesn't pass it around. But in that moment, when the fire's low, when the laughter has faded, he just holds it in his lap, and you realize you're all doing the same thing, clinging to pieces of the world before the war. Even if it's just for a few minutes, even if you'll have to march again in the morning, even if no one goes home in the end. Tonight, at least you have this: the glow of the fire, the sound of familiar voices, the shape of something fragile in your palm, and that's enough to keep marching one more day. Section 3. You wake up to the sound of hooves, not the orderly clatter of cavalry in formation, but the loose, chaotic rhythm of a caravan. Wagons creak. Women's voices drift on the wind. The camp is buzzing. Something's changed. And then you see them, the followers of the army, trailing in after the foot soldiers like shadows that somehow have carts and lives of their own. They're not soldiers, not officially, but they've been walking behind every army since war was invented. Some historians call them camp followers. Others call them the lifeblood of the road. You just call them necessary. These people, merchants, blacksmiths, cooks, medics, wives, lovers, children, aren't here to fight. They're here because soldiers can't live on duty alone. You can't eat a sword, after all. You can't stitch a wound with valor, and you definitely can't ease a longing heart with military discipline. Tonight, the camp takes on a new rhythm. Fires are brighter, voices louder. There's trading happening, boots for food, coins for blankets. You smell meat roasting, spices, perfume. Someone's playing a lute. You pass a woman with weathered hands mending a tunic. Beside her, a boy, 10 maybe, holds the reins of a donkey. He's not a soldier, but you recognize that hollow look in his eyes. He's already seen too much. Then there are the women. Some are wives of soldiers. Some are healers. Some are traveling merchants, selling buttons and beads and candles. And some are here for more personal reasons. Not everyone says it aloud, but everyone knows. The church disapproves. Commanders pretend not to notice. But these women, some married, some not, form a quiet, powerful undercurrent in the Army's daily life. They soothe, comfort, listen, tend to wounds both seen and unseen. You see a fellow soldier sitting beside one of them now, their heads bent close in conversation. No armor between them, no weapons, just words, just presence. It's easy to assume it's about pleasure, but more often it's about permission to feel human again, to laugh, to be held, to cry without shame. One historian noted that medieval armies functioned more like traveling societies than modern fighting machines. They had blacksmiths forging arrowheads, seamstresses fixing tunics, washerwomen rinsing blood from linen. There were entertainers, dancers, and priests. It was messy, loud, and deeply human. And sometimes it got romantic. Sometimes a soldier met a follower and something bloomed. Slowly, carefully, a shared smile over soup, a small carved token exchanged in secret, a name whispered too softly to be regulation. Other times things weren't so sweet. There were fights, jealousy, heartbreak, rejections. Soldiers sometimes made promises they couldn't keep. All right, I'll come back. I'll protect you. And when they didn't, the camp moved on anyway, because it had to. There's a phrase written in a 15th century French military diary. The tents may be canvas, but the feelings beneath them are real. You don't know who wrote it, but you understand it. Because tonight, the camp doesn't feel like a war zone. It feels like a village. There's a woman braiding another's hair, A boy chasing a goose past a row of wagons, a dog curled up under a cook fire. And somewhere nearby, you hear quiet weeping. Not loud, not dramatic, just honest. The soldiers don't look away. They've heard that sound before. They've made it themselves. You feel the weight of your armor less tonight, not because the steel is lighter, but because your soul is. Just a little. Because the world has come to visit, riding in on wagons with wheels that squeak and carrying reminders of the people you're trying to protect, even if you barely remember how. There's a woman selling scarves. You buy one. You don't need it, but you want to hold something soft, something that doesn't kill. She asks you your name. You tell her. And just like that, you're not just the archer or the spearman anymore. You're a person again, someone with a name, a story, someone who might deserve comfort. You watch two soldiers carve dice out of bone. One of them is whistling a tune you haven't heard since home. It takes you a moment to realize it's the lullaby your sister used to sing to her baby. You hum along, and in that moment you're not at war. You're not preparing to die. You're remembering how to live. But let's not romanticize too much. The camp still has shadows. Not every follower is kind. Not every soldier is gentle. Exploitation happens. So does heartbreak. So does betrayal. The lines between care and commerce, between affection and survival, blur like ink in the rain. Historians still argue whether the presence of camp followers weakened discipline or saved morale. Some medieval military codes explicitly banned them. Others quietly allowed them because they knew soldiers are not machines. They need care. They need touch. They need laughter and warmth and something to fight for beyond orders barked across cold fields. Tonight, you sleep with a full belly, not just from stew, but from something deeper, a conversation, a human moment. You fall asleep not staring into flames this time, but into eyes that look back at you with recognition. And even though the war is still there, even though tomorrow you may bleed or run or fall, tonight you belong to something again. Not just an army, a moment, a life that's bigger than swords and banners. Section 4. The night grows quiet again, but now tucked up under your blanket with the scent of stew still lingering in your beard, you reach for something precious, a letter. It's crumpled at the edges, stained from sweat and soot, folded and unfolded too many times to count. It's from home, maybe from your wife, your mother, a friend, someone who remembered you weren't just a soldier, but someone who still breathes, laughs, hopes. You unfold it slowly. The handwriting is uneven, either from shaky hands or the trembling emotion behind each word. You read it again. You've read it 100 times already, but it's different tonight, now that the camp feels less like a battlefield and more like a village. The words aren't fancy. There's nothing poetic, just a few lines about crops, the dog, a neighbor's illness, a baby born in spring. But somehow, those details feel like gold. They're proof that the world you left still exists, still moves forward without you, even if it hurts to know it does. Some soldiers don't get letters, not because no one loves them, but because some families can't write, or the messenger never made it, or worse, they've already been forgotten. Those men watch others reading, pretending not to care, but you can feel the ache in their silence. Tonight, you offer to read your letter aloud. Not all of it, just a few lines. You don't expect anyone to listen, but they do. One by one, heads lean in. The firelight flickers across hardened faces, now softened by memories they've tried to bury. You speak slowly. Each word lands like a heartbeat. You pause when your voice cracks, and no one mocks you. Not out here. And when you're finished, one of the younger soldiers clears his throat and says, "My sister used to say that exact thing about our geese." The group laughs. Not at you. With you. That's the power of words from home. They don't just remind you who you were, they help everyone remember who they are. Letter writing in medieval times was no small feat. Ink was expensive, parchment even more so. Most soldiers couldn't write themselves and relied on scribes, monks, priests, or literate officers to pen their thoughts. Some men paid a copper to a scribe to transcribe love notes, while others dictated quick messages between battles. A common sign-off, "Pray for me, and I shall for you." Because even if the words were simple, the hope they carried was monumental. Some soldiers went even further. They carried locks of hair sewn into their tunics. Others wore rings carved from wood. One knight, according to a surviving journal, tattooed his wife's name across his shoulder blade using ink and a dagger. It wasn't vanity, it was armor, emotional armor against the emptiness. Historians still debate whether most soldiers actually received letters regularly or if these stories are the exception. Some argue that letter writing was reserved for nobles and literate men, but oral tradition was strong too. Messages were passed in person. Tales were memorized and repeated across miles. So even if it wasn't written, the sentiment traveled. You've seen men sleep with letters tucked into their boots, kiss the parchment before battle. Whisper replies to a name on a page as if the sender might hear them through time. One night, your tent mate Thomas pulls something from his pack. It's a little book, the cover cracked and worn. Inside are tiny drawings, portraits, you realize. One of a girl with laughing eyes, another of a baby in swaddling clothes. You draw these, you ask. He nods. I see them clear this way. He doesn't cry. He doesn't have to. That little book holds more than art. It's his anchor. And you? You feel a little jealous. Not of the pictures, but of the ability to preserve someone so carefully in ink and memory. The next day, you sit with a scribe and ask him to write something. You're not sure what to say. Tell her, you begin, and then stop. What do you tell someone who's waiting? Do you say you're fine, even if you're not? Do you lie, or do you let the truth bleed through the page? You choose truth, gentle truth. You say, the nights are cold, but I think of your laugh, and it warms me. The stars here don't shine like they do from our roof. I miss our window. I miss your bread. I miss the sound of your hands when you knead the dough. I miss being needed for something other than killing. The scribe pauses. Then he looks up and says softly, that'll reach her better than 1,000 victories. You don't know if the letter will make it, but you needed to write it. Sometimes the act of sending is enough, and the soldiers around you, they notice. Not because you showed weakness, but because you showed heart. Because out here, courage isn't just rushing into battle. It's daring to remember the world you're fighting for. It's believing that someone somewhere is reading your name with a smile. And when night falls again and the wind howls low across the tents, you lie back and close your eyes. The fire crackles, the letter is under your head, folded inside your pouch. And you dream, not of war or death or glory, but of someone waiting at a window, candle glowing, hands stained with flour, eyes scanning the road, hoping that someday soon you'll be more than a name on paper again. Section 5. The next night, the wind carries laughter into your camp long before you know where it's coming from. Then you see it. A circle of men, tankards in hand, shoulders shaking, mouths wide open, faces flushed with joy, or at least with distraction. You're drawn in before you realize it, because in this life, laughter is rarer than gold, and you trade your sword for a belly laugh on the right night. Welcome to one of the only real escapes left in the soldier's world: drinking, games, and jesters. By the dim light of a campfire, a wooden cup is thrust into your hand. It smells like fermented apples and something a little more suspicious. You sip anyway. The liquid burns, but it's warm, and more importantly, it loosens something inside you, something that's been wound too tight since the last skirmish, since the last funeral, since the last letter that never came. This isn't just drinking for drinking's sake. This is ritual. This is survival. Across the fire, someone rolls dice made of bone. There's shouting, cheering, the slap of palms on thighs. The stakes aren't high, maybe a strip of bacon, an extra blanket, or bragging rights until morning, but the emotions, oh, they're sky high. Games in medieval military camps weren't invented just for amusement. They were coping mechanisms, emotional armor, you might say. Dice, board games, even betting on rat races. Whatever it took to make a man forget, just for a moment, that the world outside the firelight was cruel and uncaring. A few men gather around a makeshift chessboard, wooden pieces carved from old arrows and horse bones. You don't know the rules, but you sit and watch anyway. One knight has a strategy so daring it makes the others groan with admiration. That's the same move he used on the commander's daughter, someone whispers, and the group howls with laughter. There it is again. That sweet human mischief, still alive beneath layers of steel and calloused hands. And then, into this warm bubble of distraction, a jester steps into the light. Yes, really, He's not wearing bells or bright colors. He doesn't have a stage. But he's one of those men whose very presence turns heads. Every army has one, the unofficial fool, the licensed jester, the one allowed to say things others can't. His tongue is sharp, his timing perfect, his jokes walking the knife's edge between bravery and danger. Tonight, he impersonates the commander, complete with puffed cheeks and exaggerated limp. The men erupt. One even spills his drink from laughing too hard. The jester bows deeply and then says, "I hear the enemy sent a message today, asked if we were still lost or just dumb." More laughter, but also something else, relief, because the jester doesn't just entertain, he diffuses tension. He says what others are afraid to. He turns fear into farce and anxiety into comedy. And somehow, in doing so, he gives the men permission to feel again. Historians still argue whether jesters were common in medieval military camps. Some say they were too rare, reserved for courts and castles. Others insist that every army had a jester in disguise, a cook, a bard, a scout, someone who knew that levity could mean the difference between mutiny and morale. And of course, there's always the one who goes too far. Tonight, a joke about the church crosses a line. The laughter dies down, the camp goes quiet, but then someone snorts. Then another. And the moment breaks again as if everyone collectively decided, better a scolding from the heavens than another night in silence. Beyond the fire, a few soldiers are gambling, not just with dice, but with stories. They play a game where the loser must tell a truth. What do you miss most? My dog. What do you fear most? Being forgotten. The answers are quick, but raw. And after a while, no one remembers who's winning. You walk away from the fire later, your face sore from smiling. The games, the drinks, the jesters, they haven't changed your fate. The war's still out there, the cold's still in your bones, but your chest feels lighter, like you've been reminded that you're still a person. That joy isn't treason, that even here, in the dirtiest corners of a battlefield, you can laugh without guilt. You crawl into your blanket that night with a stupid grin on your face. You think of home, but for once, it doesn't hurt. You think of dying tomorrow, and it doesn't freeze you in place. Because tonight, you lived a little. And when the wind shifts and blows smoke across your tent, it carries not fear, but laughter. Section 6. When dawn comes again, it's not the blare of horns or barked orders that wakes you. It's the sound of murmuring voices, low and reverent, drifting between tents like incense. A few steps outside your sleeping roll, you find the source. A small gathering around a man in dark robes, holding a wooden cross in one hand and a book in the other. The camp priest has arrived. His robe is dusted with road grime. His boots are the same as yours. But his voice, calm, deep, worn from years of whispered prayers and shouted absolutions, cuts through the morning haze like a sword through fog. You join the circle, not because you're especially devout or even sure what you believe anymore, but because there's something grounding about the ritual, something ancient and unmoving in a world that shifts constantly beneath your feet. The priest reads from memory more than book. He speaks in Latin, but everyone knows what he means. The rhythm of the words is more important than their translation. You don't need to know each syllable to feel the weight behind them. Blessed are the peacemakers, he says, and someone in the crowd mutters, we wouldn't know. A few men chuckle. The priest smiles gently. He's heard it all before. You remember that most medieval soldiers weren't monks or theologians, but religion still seeped into every crevice of their lives. War might take your home, your friends, your body, but it couldn't take your soul, or so they hoped. Some believe the church opposed all violence, but in truth, it often stood shoulder to shoulder with the sword. Clergymen blessed banners before battle, anointed kings before campaigns, and gave last rites on muddy fields while arrows still flew overhead. Still, the church also tried to regulate war. Remember the peace and truce of God? Those were rules, dating back to the 10th century, meant to limit who could be attacked and when. No fighting on Sundays. No harming peasants, priests, or livestock. Did everyone follow it? Not exactly. But it gave war a veneer of order, a sacred frame to something utterly chaotic. Back at camp after the service, you watch as the priest makes his rounds. He listens to confessions under open sky. He blesses small tokens, rosary beads, carved crosses, charms wrapped in linen. One soldier asks him to bless a dagger. The priest hesitates, then nods. He gets it. Faith out here isn't clean. It's not holy hymns in marble halls. It's blood-stained prayers whispered with trembling lips. It's clutching a crucifix in one hand while thrusting a spear with the other. It's hope and fear braided together so tightly that they become the same thing. Some soldiers wear relics, fragments of saint bones or shreds of cloaks said to belong to martyrs. A knight beside you has a splinter of the true cross tied to his belt. Another man has a small wooden carving of St. George, his sword chipped but his stance defiant. And then there are the superstitions. Not church doctrine, but folklore whispered when the priest is out of earshot. Like the belief that iron nails sewn into boots keep demons at bay, or that a pebble from a saint's shrine, if held during sleep, will ward off nightmares, or that if you die with a coin under your tongue, your soul gets to skip purgatory. Historians still argue how much of medieval battlefield faith was dogma and how much was desperation. Some say soldiers were deeply religious. Others say they clung to anything, sacred or strange, that might help them make sense of the carnage. You think it's both. Because tonight, as the fires burn low again, a man with shaking hands asks the priest, "What happens if I die tomorrow?" The priest pauses. He doesn't lie. He says, "Then I will say your name. I will ask God to remember it." The man nods. Sometimes that's all you need. But not everyone finds peace in prayer. Some men wrestle with guilt, things they've done, things they didn't stop. A few drink harder after confession than before. Others write letters they'll never send. You've seen a man fall to his knees in the mud, sobbing over a broken sword, not because it was his weapon, but because it belonged to his brother who no longer breathes. And still, the priest shows up, every morning, every night. He walks among you like a ghost, or a shepherd, or a reminder that there are still things worth believing in, even here, even now. One night the priest pulls you aside. He says, "You seem quiet," you shrug. "Aren't we all?" He doesn't smile. No, some are screaming on the inside. Silence is something else. He offers you a prayer. You don't know the words. But when he speaks them, your chest tightens. Not from fear, not even from belief, but from recognition. Because something inside you has been waiting to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be reminded that you are not just a blade with legs, not just a killer with orders, not just a name on a roster. You are still a soul, still someone, still salvageable. And that might be the most powerful thing you've heard all campaign. So when the priest presses a small charm into your hand, nothing more than a smooth stone with a cross etched into it, you hold it like it's priceless. Because in this world of blood and steel, hope is the most precious relic of all. Section 7. You're woken before dawn this time, not by sounds of laughter, not by hymns or sermons, but by the low, rhythmic hum of steel scraping leather. The air is colder. The camp is quieter. Men move like ghosts, strapping on armor, testing bowstrings, whispering to themselves or to nothing at all. Battle is coming. You feel it before anyone says it. It's in the sky, in the silence. You stand and move without needing to be told what to do. Because this isn't your first morning like this. It won't be your last. You check your sword, not just for sharpness, but for memory. This blade has history now. Marks from the last clash. A chip from where it struck another man's shield. A dent from a desperate block. You run your fingers along its edge like a musician tuning an old, familiar instrument. Nearby, a knight kneels beside his horse, murmuring prayers. Another soldier sharpens his spear with such intensity you wonder if he even hears the world around him. Someone throws up behind a cart. No one mocks him. Everyone understands. This is fear, not the wild, panicked kind. The quiet kind. The kind that tightens the chest and makes your hands steady instead of shaking, because when death feels close, your body goes into survival mode. Your thoughts become mechanical. Your soul goes into hiding. Then come the orders. A low command passed from mouth to mouth. It's time. You fall into formation, shield to shield. The armor is heavy, but somehow you don't feel it anymore. Your world narrows. All you hear is the scuff of boots, the snort of horses, the clatter of chainmail. You march like you're being pulled by fate itself. You crest a hill, and there they are, the enemy. Not faceless monsters, men, boys even. Some look like farmers dressed in armor too big for them. Others, seasoned veterans with cold, calculating eyes. You don't hate them. Not really. But you do want to live, and that means they have to fall. Trumpets sound, and the world explodes into chaos. Arrows blot out the sky, shields rise, horses charge. The air becomes a soup of screams, smoke, and blood. You don't think, you react. A sword comes down toward your head, and you block it with your shield so hard your arm goes numb. You shove back. Someone slips in the mud. You stab down. You don't know if it was fatal. You move on. In the middle of this, time becomes strange. Seconds stretch, minutes vanish. You see a friend fall and swear he was beside you a heartbeat ago. Someone screams your name. You turn, it's Tomas, his legs caught under a fallen horse. You drag him free without thinking. A mace nearly caves in your skull. You duck. Instinct. Then, just like that, it's over. You don't even realize it at first. The enemy is retreating or dead. Or both. The commander's banner is still flying. Your side has won? It feels wrong to call it that. Because all around you are the silent costs of victory. Bodies, limbs, blood that doesn't seem to stop flowing from the earth itself. You find a man crawling through the mud. His mouth moves. You lean closer. He's praying. You stay with him. Because someone should. Later, back at camp, no one cheers. No one sings. They just sit quietly. One man is still gripping his sword with both hands, long after the fight has ended. His knuckles white, his face blank. You approach Tomas. He's wrapped in linen, leg bound tight. He gives you a weak smile. "Ow, you won," he says. You nod, but neither of you says more. You both know how thin the line was. A squire walks past, his shirt soaked in someone else's blood. He's maybe 15. He looks like he aged 10 years today. The priest says last rites over the fallen. You hear the same words again and again until they blur into background noise. Someone tries to count the dead. They stop after 20. Historians often debate how brutal medieval battles truly were. Some say our modern films exaggerate. Others say we underestimate the savagery. After today, you're not sure what's worse, the violence itself or the numbness it leaves behind. You sit by the fire that night with a 1,000-yard stare and a blank mind. A woman from the camp followers brings you soup. You thank her without tasting it. Then she says something that sticks. You came back. It's so simple, but it hits hard, because not everyone did. That night, you don't dream. Your body's too tired, your mind too empty. But as you lie there, staring at the stars, you think about how fragile everything is, how quickly life turns, how easy it is to become a story someone else tells. You survived, but survival is its own kind of wound. Tomorrow, you'll laugh again. You'll eat. You'll even play dice, maybe. But tonight, you let yourself feel what no one wants to feel. The weight of still being here. You press your relic to your chest, not for magic, not even for faith, just for something to hold on to. Because out here, sometimes the smallest comforts are the only thing keeping you whole. Morning comes soft and slow, like it's apologizing for yesterday. The sun dares to shine a little, as if the sky is trying to pretend the battle didn't happen. Birds sing. Not many, but enough to make you notice. You rise with stiff limbs, sore in places you didn't even know could ache. But you're breathing. And that's not nothing. Today is for recovery. Not just the patching of wounds and fixing of gear, but something deeper. The strange ritual of rebuilding yourself after violence has pulled you apart. The camp smells like boiled herbs and burned bandages. You pass the medic's tent, really just a canvas tarp with tools laid out on a blood-stained cloth. A few men groan softly as a woman stitches flesh like a tailor with bad thread. She hums while she works. You don't know if it's for them or for herself. Pain is everywhere today, and yet it's strangely quiet. There's no shouting, no drills. The commander has given a rare order, rest. Not out of kindness, out of necessity. Even steel bends after enough strain. You sit near the fire, cradling a chunk of bread. Someone hands you a cup of warm beer, flat and sour, but welcome. A man with cracked ribs tries to tell a joke. You laugh harder than you should, and it hurts your side. It feels good to hurt that way. Soon, others gather. No one talks about yesterday. Instead, they talk about anything else. One man describes a lake near his village that always smells like lemons, even in winter. Another tells the tale of a rooster that once scared off a tax collector. You don't know if it's true, but you want it to be. You begin to notice something strange. In the aftermath of battle, men become softer. Not weaker, just more open. Walls come down. Stories spill out. Not always sad ones, sometimes beautiful, sometimes absurd, like the archer who once tied a ribbon around every arrow for luck and swears it worked, or the pikeman who dreams of opening a bakery, though he's never baked a day in his life. These aren't the same men who went to war yesterday. Something about coming that close to death makes you want to hold life tighter. You look down at your hands, dirt under the nails, blisters forming again. You use these hands to kill, to shield, to survive. Now you wonder what else they're good for. Maybe someday they'll hold a hammer instead of a sword. Maybe a quill. Maybe a child. But not today. Today they just hold a cup and warm themselves near a fire that isn't burning a village. One soldier, older, grizzled, with one eye missing, starts whittling a piece of wood. No one asks why. After an hour it starts to resemble a bird. He doesn't say what kind, just carves in silence, then hands it to a younger man with shaking hands. "Keep it," he says. "Why?" "Because your hands need something to do besides tremble." That's how healing begins here. Not with great speeches or holy miracles, but with small acts of gentleness, with the sharing of burdens that are too heavy to carry alone. And there are more burdens than just the wounds you can see. Nightmares, flashes of red and screaming, guilt over surviving, memories that cling like leeches, even in sleep. Historians still argue about how medieval soldiers processed trauma. The word PTSD didn't exist, but the signs were there. Men who flinched at thunder, who couldn't sleep unless they were curled under tables, who forgot how to speak for days after battle. Some turned to drink, others to faith. Some disappeared into the woods and never returned. Others became poets or hermits or simply quiet. And yet the army marched on, because the medieval world didn't pause for pain. But among the soldiers, you begin to see the unwritten code. Take care of your brothers, no matter how broken, no matter how silent. Someone checks your armor for damage. Another patches your cloak without asking. A third offers you half of a pear he's been saving. It tastes like sunlight. You try not to cry, not out of weakness, out of gratitude. Because in this moment, you realize something important. The only thing stronger than steel is kindness. That night, the fire burns longer than usual, not out of necessity, but comfort. Someone starts to hum, a song from the coast, half forgotten. Others join in, out of tune, but it doesn't matter. The sound wraps around you like a blanket. You fall asleep with your back to the fire, the whittled bird in your hand, and the knowledge that you are not alone. You might be a soldier, but you're still human. And here, in this fragile pause between battles, that's enough. Section 9. The days pass, and with them the bruises fade, the aches dull, and the routines return. But something shifted. You can feel it in the way the men walk, shoulders looser, gazes higher, laughter just a bit easier to find. The horrors of the last battle haven't vanished, but they've sunk beneath the surface like stones in a river. The current of daily life flows on. Today you're assigned patrol duty. That sounds dull, and maybe it should be. Just a few hours spent walking the perimeter with another soldier, checking the brush, peering into shadows, looking at suspicious mounds. But in truth, patrol is anything but boring. It's quiet, sure, but it's the kind of quiet that hums with tension. The kind where every rustle in the undergrowth makes your hand drift to your sword. Your companion is a man named Giles, tall, lean, a scout before he became a soldier. He walks like the trees might be listening, and he speaks like every word costs him something. But once you're far enough from camp, with the wind in your ears and only the birds for company, he begins to talk. Not about tactics or enemy formations, about legends. "There's a place," he says, pointing toward a hill, "where no birds ever land. They say it's cursed, that a knight was buried upright there, still in armor, after he killed his whole unit in a fit of madness." You raise an eyebrow. "Why'd he do it?" Giles shrugs. "No one knows. Some say he heard voices, others say he was cursed, or maybe he just broke." You fall silent. The story sticks with you, and you realize every patrol is also a tour of local superstition. Every hill has a name, every tree has a tale, every ruin has a whisper attached to it, and Giles knows them all. There's the rock that bleeds if chipped, the tree where hangings once happened, where ropes never rot, the pond that freezes in summer but never winter. You don't believe them? Not really. But out here, in the hush between sword clashes and trumpet calls, the mind plays tricks, And sometimes those tricks are a comfort. It's easier to believe in ghosts than in cruelty, easier to blame the wind than your own nightmares. Historians debate whether these legends were born out of truth or fear. Some insist they were folk memory, distorted recollections of real events. Others say they were invented by bored men desperate to impose meaning on meaningless violence. Either way, they survive. Like the story of the Headless Knight. Every region has one. The details vary, a battle lost, a betrayal, a cursed sword, but the image is always the same. A rider with no head, galloping under a blood moon, seeking revenge. Giles tells you his version. He swears he saw it once, years ago, when he was stationed farther east. Just a shape on the road, he says. No sound, no horse, just motion. You don't want to, but you don't. Because deep down, you've seen stranger things than a ghost, like a man survive a spear through the chest, or a child walking barefoot across a battlefield humming, or the way some soldiers seem to know they're going to die and they smile anyway. The world isn't neat. It's not logical. And maybe that's why these stories endure, because they offer patterns where chaos reigns. Back at camp, Giles leads you to a pile of stones near a tree stump. He crouches down and adds one more stone to the pile. What's that, you ask? For those we can't name, he says simply. Men who died and weren't found, or were, but no one remembered them. You nod and add a stone of your own. It feels silly. Then it doesn't. That night, a storm rolls in. Thunder shakes the canvas of your tent. Rain hammers down like 1,000 galloping hooves. You lie awake, listening to the chaos, and wonder if the ghost stories are awake too. You think about the headless knight, about the bleeding stone, about the buried sword said to whisper when the moon is high. And you think, maybe belief is a kind of shield, not for the body, but for the soul. The next morning the storm has passed, and so has a part of your fear. You step into the mud with a clearer head. You check your gear. You help a younger soldier tie his cuirass properly. You make a quiet vow to learn some of Giles' stories, not because they're true, but because they matter. Because every soldier needs something to hold on to in the dark. A god, a memory, a myth. Even you, especially you. Section 10, the sun rises with a golden calm, but your camp does not. There's a new kind of tension in the air. The quiet before something unspoken. Whispers pass between tents. You hear the word messenger and then surrender, and someone mutters a prayer under their breath. Another fight looms on the horizon. Not a battle this time. Something more uncertain. You're summoned to the edge of the camp by a grizzled sergeant who smells like dried sweat and boiled onions. We're moving, he says flatly, but not to war, yet. You're headed to a keep. There's talk of diplomacy. Diplomacy? That's a foreign word to most soldiers. Wars are fought, not negotiated, at least not by people like you. But you pack your gear anyway, help a limping comrade onto a mule, and set out with a detachment of troops. The landscape rolls past like a painting. Forests fraying into meadows, ruined chapels crouching by crooked roads, farmland choked by weeds. The world still looks bruised. Then you see it. A fortress of gray stone and ivy, perched atop a low hill like a crown. It's no castle, not in the grand sense. More like a fortified manor with dreams of grandeur. Banners flutter weakly from the walls, faded colors, unfamiliar crests. You wonder if they still mean anything. Inside the keep, life feels foreign. The people here wear silk, not chainmail. They speak in riddles and half-truths. You're offered wine instead of beer, cheese instead of gruel. Someone tries to polish your boots. You politely decline. You're a sword among scrolls here. Still, the commander meets with the lord of the keep. You don't know what's said. You're not meant to. But you catch pieces, land rights, militia, border patrol, marriage treaty. It all sounds distant, like the plotting of kings and ghosts. But then things get weirder. That night, your unit is assigned rooms inside the keep. Real beds, straw mattresses with linen covers, wash basins, even candles. It should feel like a gift. Instead, it feels like a trap. The silence is too clean. The stone walls whisper when the wind moves. The tapestries hang stiff as corpses. You try to sleep, but something pulls at you, a strange itch in the back of your mind. A hum, almost, like a song half remembered. At midnight, you wake suddenly. There's someone at the window. Not a person, exactly. A shape, cloaked in shadow, barely there. You blink and it's gone. You rise, heart pounding, and step into the corridor. You're not alone. Another soldier, eyes wide, stands frozen near the stairwell. Did you hear it too? He asks. You want to say no. Instead, you nod. Turns out this keep has a reputation. The servants whisper that it was built on cursed land, that every lord who's ruled it has died in bed, gasping, eyes open, clawing at the sheets. That at night, the walls hum with something that isn't wind. You think it's nonsense until you walk past a chapel and see a crucifix hanging upside down. That's not wear and tear, that's intent. You report it. The steward laughs it off. Wind knocked it loose, he says, not even looking, but you notice he doesn't go near the chapel after dark. Historians still argue whether medieval nobility were more or less superstitious than common soldiers. Some say they clung to relics and rituals even tighter, building keeps with sacred geometry, burying bones beneath thresholds to anchor souls, holding exorcisms in banquet halls. Others claim they mocked such things until night fell. You begin to see signs everywhere. A knight who wakes screaming, a stable boy who swears the horses are watching him, really watching, like men, a scribe who finds pages of his own diary filled in with someone else's handwriting. And through it all, the lord of the keep grows sicker. You hear it from a maid, fever, night sweats. He speaks in tongues. He scratches symbols into his own walls. The priests say it's spiritual, she whispers. The healers say it's plague, but it feels like something else. And you just want to leave. But you're under orders to stay until negotiations are done. So you keep your gear close. You sleep with your blade. And at night, you dream of a voice calling your name from beneath the floorboards. One morning, you find boot prints in the dust of the keep's cellar. Barefoot, too large for a man, leading nowhere. That's when the commander declares, "We're done here." And just like that, you're back on the road. But the keep lingers in your mind. It clings to you. In your dreams, its towers rise behind your eyes. In your silence, you still hear its whispers. You never learn what happened to the Lord. But weeks later, you hear a rumor. The keep burned down. Everyone inside gone. And you don't feel surprised. Some places should be left alone. Some walls remember too much. You don't talk about it with the others. But you notice they pray more often now. And when you pass ruins on the road, none of you look too long. Because if there's one thing soldiers know better than war, it's the sound of a place that wants to be forgotten. The road away from the cursed keep feels longer than it should, as if each step is dragging some invisible burden behind it. You tell yourself it's just fatigue, just shadows clinging to your mind like smoke. But everyone's quieter now, more watchful. Even the jokers keep their punchlines close to the chest. Eventually, you join back with the main host, a mass of soldiers, banners, tents, carts, and cook fires that sprawls like a wandering city across the countryside. The army is on the move again, heading toward a territory rumored to be on the brink of rebellion. And this time, there's no diplomacy in sight. Still, the march isn't immediate. You're given a few days' rest while scouts gather intelligence. This temporary reprieve offers a strange lull, a time between storms, a time for something soldiers rarely get to do. Remember who they were before all this. Oh, you find yourself near the outskirts of camp, watching a group of younger men gather around a makeshift field. They're kicking a stitched leather ball between them, hooting and shouting as dust clouds bloom underfoot. No rules, no sides, just movement and laughter. Medieval games weren't just child's play. They were part of life, ritual, stress relief, even practice for war. There were tug-of-war contests, foot races, stick duels, dice games carved into tree trunks. Some say soldiers played a version of chess using real skulls. You're not sure that one's true, but it wouldn't surprise you. You're drawn to the energy, to the noise, and before long, you're playing too. You're not good. You stumble, fumble, curse when someone elbows you in the ribs. But you smile, and that alone feels like a victory. Later that evening, someone starts telling stories again. Not ghost stories this time, but tales of home, of brothers, of markets, of girls who said maybe and meant never. You sit around the fire with a bowl of stew, nodding along, the firelight catching on tired eyes and cracked lips, and then someone asks a question. What will you do after this? Silence, not heavy, just surprised, as if the idea of after hadn't occurred to anyone for a long time. One man says he'll go back to the smithy. Another dreams of buying a boat and fishing alone for the rest of his life. A third, younger, just shrugs. I don't know anything else, he admits. When they ask you, you hesitate. Because the truth is, you're not sure who you are anymore. Are you still the farmer's son, the merchant's apprentice, the boy who once carved his name into a church pew with a nail? Or are you only what the war has made you? It's a question that haunts more soldiers than any battlefield specter. Historians still debate how medieval men coped with the identity-shifting brutality of war. Some returned to civilian life as if nothing had changed. Others couldn't adapt, became wanderers or mercenaries. Some turned to the church, some to the bottle. Some simply disappeared from the records. But one thing is certain, no one came back the same. That night, you find a piece of parchment and a bit of charcoal and start writing. It's not poetry, not exactly a letter either. Just thoughts, scratched into the surface like carving into bark. A record of what you've seen, what you felt, who you've become. You don't know if anyone will ever read it. But it helps. There's comfort in shaping chaos into words, even clumsy ones. The next day, orders come down. March at dawn. Another province, another siege, another story waiting to be written in mud and blood. You pack your things, you find your sword, you tighten your belt. But before you leave, you bury the parchment in a shallow hole near the campfire. Maybe someone will find it. Maybe they won't. Like either way, it proves you were here, that you were more than a shadow with a blade. As you set off, you glance back once, not at the camp, but at the men, the laughing, limping, shouting crowd of them. And you realize, even if you don't know exactly who you are anymore, you know one thing. You're not alone. You never were. Word game. Section 12. The road stretches on, long and dusty, curving between hills like a half-forgotten story. You march in a long, staggered line of boots and hooves, wheels and weapons, the clink of armor blending with the sound of coughing, murmured songs, and creaking leather. It's hot today, the kind of heat that bakes the smell of sweat and horses into your very skin. You're not sure if you'll ever smell clean again. The destination this time? A rebel stronghold nestled deep within a wooded valley. Rumors swirl like gnats that it's led by a rogue baron, that he communes with spirits, that his soldiers fight with poison blades and wear animal bones for armor. You've learned not to trust campfire gossip, but you also don't laugh it off anymore, because you've seen too much. The army moves cautiously. Scouts go ahead. Messengers ride out and return pale-faced. The terrain is difficult. Dense forest, narrow trails, hidden streams, perfect for ambushes. The commander grows more nervous each day, though he hides it behind barked orders and hard stares. Then one morning it happens. You wake to shouts, followed by a sickening whistle through the air. An arrow slams into the post beside your head. Another strikes the cook fire, scattering embers. Someone screams. The camp explodes into chaos. Ambush. You scramble for your gear, heart pounding, brain not yet caught up to your body. You see figures darting between the trees, fast, low, cloaked in leaves and mud. The enemy looks like the forest itself has risen up to strike you down. You and a handful of others rush to form a shield wall. It's messy, uneven. A javelin pierces the man beside you, and you feel his blood splash your arm. You don't have time to think about it. You return the blow. Lunge forward with your spear. Feel the crunch of impact, the weight of another life added to your own. The ambush doesn't last long, but it leaves its mark. 6 dead, dozens wounded, supplies scattered. The commander curses the trees. Still, the army presses on, deeper into the woods. Now every snapping twig sounds like death. And then, on the 3rd day, you reach it. The rebel stronghold. You expected a castle. What you find is something older, stranger, a circle of stones and timber half buried in the earth. Not built atop the land, but within it. A fortress shaped like a ritual. The walls are draped in animal hides. Skulls hang from branches. Smoke rises from a pit at its center, carrying the scent of herbs, blood, and something sweetly rotten. This isn't war. This is something older than war, something primal. The commander hesitates. The men whisper about druids, curses, ancient gods, about the wild men of the woods, figures from tales told to scare children into bed. You remember hearing stories like that once. Now you're standing in one. A parley is called. But no one leaves the stronghold to meet you, so the siege begins. Not with catapults or ladders, those would be useless here, but with containment. You form a ring around the place. No one in, no one out. Days pass, then weeks, but the rebels never break. You hear them chanting at night, deep rhythmic sounds that crawl under your skin and nest in your bones. You swear the trees sway with the noise, even when there's no wind. Soldiers grow sick, not with plague, with something else. They complain of dreams, visions of fire, of being hunted by beasts with human eyes. Some refuse to sleep. Others can't wake up. One man walks into the forest and never returns. Even the priest is rattled. He burns incense. He anoints weapons. He draws holy symbols on your shields. But the symbols fade faster than they should. You're afraid. All of you are. Historians still debate the nature of medieval forest cults. Some claim they were exaggerated, romanticized fears of pagans who simply resisted Christian rule. Others insist they were real, that certain remote communities kept old rites alive far longer than anyone suspected. You believe it now, because you've seen the eyes of the enemy, and they weren't eyes of hatred. They were eyes of knowing. They pitied you, as if you were the ones lost. Eventually, the siege ends, not with a charge, but with silence. One morning, the stronghold is empty. No bodies, no signs of escape. Just smoke still rising from the fire pit, and rows of bones arranged in careful spirals. You enter cautiously. Inside, you find no weapons, no gold, just markings carved into the stone. One of the scholars among the officers squints and whispers, "It's a warning." Against what? He doesn't say. That night, the soldiers burn the place, just to be sure. You ride out of the woods with smoke behind you and silence ahead. And you don't speak for days, because deep in your bones you know, you didn't win. You just survived. The road after the forest feels too wide, too open. You ride through farmland now, burnt fields, collapsed fences, abandoned villages. What once smelled of wheat and cow dung now smells like soot and rot. The war has passed through this land like a fire through dry brush, and what remains is ash. You pass a well that's been bricked over, hastily, a chapel where birds have built nests in the rafters, and the altar has been repurposed to store dried meat. A motherless calf bleats from an empty barn. These are the quiet tragedies, the kind you don't sing about in taverns. The army stops in one of these hushed villages to resupply. The commander wants to regroup and send word back to the capital. Rumor is reinforcements are coming. Or maybe it's just that he wants to delay the next campaign. Either way, you finally get more than a single night under a roof. You're billeted in a half-burned inn with a few other soldiers. The walls are scorched, and one corner of the building leans in like a drunk man, but it stands. There's even a fireplace that works if you feed it enough kindling. It feels cozy in a haunted kind of way. You make your bed on straw, light a candle, hang your gear within reach, and for the first time in weeks, you let your body go soft. But peace is deceptive, because in stillness, your mind begins to wander. The dreams return, of the forest, of the stone stronghold, of the rebels who never screamed. You wake in sweat, heart hammering, sure that something is watching you from the rafters. It's just a bird, probably. The village is mostly empty, save for a handful of old women, a boy with a limp, and a priest who hasn't said mass in months. He agrees to bless the company, but insists on doing it outside the church, says the walls don't feel clean anymore. You believe him. To pass the time, you help fix a roof, patch a fence, teach a child how to hold a sword, just in case. These acts are small, but they matter. There's a kind of healing in them, in rebuilding. Still, you're not blind to the fear in the villagers' eyes. They see the army as protection, but also as a storm cloud. Because soldiers don't just bring defense, they bring attention, blood, consequences. Historians write about this time as the long pause. Campaigns often slowed not from lack of orders, but because armies themselves unraveled under their own weight. Disease, desertion, morale collapse. A band of warriors can conquer, yes, but only if they stay human long enough to hold a sword. Some don't. And in this village, you begin to understand why. One man, Henrik, a bowman, starts drinking every morning, says it calms his hands. Another won't take off his armor, not even to sleep. I feel safer in the steel, he says, eyes wide, like he's waiting for arrows in the shadows. You catch a young recruit drawing symbols in the dirt at night, not Christian ones. What is it, you ask? He shrugs. Something my mother taught me. For protection. You let him finish. Because honestly, you could use the protection too. There's a growing sense that you're not in control of this story anymore, that the war is shaping itself like a storm on the sea, indifferent to the boats it tosses. Then comes the report. A messenger arrives, mud splattered, bleeding from the leg. He speaks a single word before collapsing. Uprising. A nearby city has revolted, not against your side, but against everyone. No banners, no loyalty, just chaos. The commander orders the army to move. Now, no rest, no discussion. As you pack, the village priest pulls you aside. You won't win there, he says, his voice like crumbling parchment. They've remembered something old, something angry. You don't ask him to explain. You don't want to know. Because the truth is, you're starting to feel the war twisting. It's no longer about borders or thrones or treaties. It's something darker, something feral. The rules are changing, and you're just trying not to be swallowed. That night, before you ride, you walk to the edge of the village and look back. The boy you trained waves at you. You wave back, and you hope he never learns to use that sword. Because the world he's growing into, it doesn't reward skill. It rewards endurance. You mount your horse. The road ahead glows faintly under the moon. You ride into it, unsure if you're chasing peace or just outrunning madness. Section 14. You ride through the night like a shadow on the wind, torches flickering against the moonless dark. The company stretches long behind you, hundreds of tired bodies moving as one great groaning beast. Armor clinks, hooves strike stone, and somewhere a man coughs until he retches. No one stops, not for sickness, not for sleep. The city ahead, Salenburg, isn't large, but it's old. Ancient, some say. It squats in a bend of the river like a sullen god, its towers crumbling, its bridges crooked with time. It's been quiet for decades, neutral, forgotten, until now. The rebellion here isn't political, it's something else. No banners, no leader, no demands, just violence. You arrive at dawn and the gates are open, no guards, no cries of alarm, just a yawning mouth into stillness. You ride in with the first group, weapons drawn, breaths held. The streets are clean, no blood, no debris, no bodies, but no people either. Just rows of shuttered windows and cold hearths. It feels like entering a painting, something captured mid-moment, suspended in silence. The commander whispers, something's wrong. You agree. You split into search parties. Yours is assigned the West Quarter, a sprawl of narrow alleys, broken market stalls, shrines overtaken by ivy. You knock on doors, no answers. You peek through windows and see untouched meals, still warm candles, a doll lying in a pool of spilled milk. And then the noises begin. Not loud, not sharp, just a murmur, like someone whispering through walls. You grip your sword tighter, the sun rises higher, but the shadows don't seem to shrink. They curl, cling, stretch like they have minds of their own. A soldier disappears. One moment he's behind you, the next, gone. No sound, no trace. You call for him, nothing. Later, someone finds his helmet in a dry fountain, filled to the brim with feathers. That night, the army camps just inside the walls. Fires are lit, watches are doubled, prayers are mumbled more urgently now. You lie awake, staring at the stars between the teeth of broken rooftops. And you dream, everyone does. The same dream. You're in a cathedral, but it's upside down. The altar is above you, the floor is glass, and beneath it, something writhes. You don't see its face, but you feel its hunger. You wake gasping. Others do too. One soldier tries to gouge his own ears out. Another weeps until his voice cracks. And still, no enemies. No attackers. Only the city, watching. Historians still argue what happened in Salenburg. Some claim it was mass hysteria, a kind of spiritual infection passed from dream to dream. Others whisper that the city had long hidden a cult older than the church, and that something beneath its foundations had finally stirred. You believe both, because on the third day, the cathedral bell rings. No one pulled the rope. It just tolls. Once, twice, then 13 times. You count. Everyone does. And then the people return, from the sewers, from beneath floorboards, pale, silent, eyes rimmed in black as if they haven't slept in weeks. They don't speak. They don't run. They simply begin walking out of the city in single file. You and your company stand aside, weapons slack. No one dares stop them. One old man brushes past you. You ask, "Where are you going?" He smiles, empty, joyless. "We've served our sentence." And they vanish down the road, leaving the city hollow behind them. Your commander gives the only order that makes sense. Abandon it. The gates are shut once more, sealed, and marked with chalk symbols that no one recognizes but everyone pretends to. The army marches on, not because the war demands it, but because you can't stay there. You sleep fitfully the next few nights, and no one speaks of Salenborg again. But you notice that everyone checks the shadows a little more carefully, that men now dream with one eye open, and that every time a bell tolls, even from a distant village, you flinch, because you remember not just the city, but the thing beneath it, and what it means to be forgotten by the world, but remembered by something else. Section 15. The final leg of your journey begins not with orders, but with silence. No more declarations, no rallying speeches, just the dull, unspoken understanding that the war isn't ending, it's simply dissolving. Like mist, like memory. The army moves because it must. It breathes because you all still breathe. But the spark, the thing that once made you feel noble, or righteous, or even just useful, has dimmed. You travel into the mountains now, steep passes, crumbling paths carved from cliff sides. The wind here carries no scent of war, no blood, no fire, just the ancient dust of things left behind. Here, you're told, lies the final stronghold of a rebel lord, a deserter-turned-prophet who gathered his followers in a monastery high above the world. He claims to see visions, says the scout who delivers the news, says angels told him the war is meaningless. You almost laugh. Almost. It takes 2 days to reach the place, a spire of stone half sunk into the rock face. Not a fortress, not even truly a monastery anymore, more like a shrine built atop the bones of older shrines, layered like forgotten prayers. Ivy curls around statues whose faces have been erased by time. The front gate is open. You've stopped expecting resistance. Inside you find not warriors, but pilgrims, men and women in rough robes. Some are former soldiers. You can tell by their posture, the way they instinctively reach for blades that are no longer there. Others are peasants, even nobles, all kneeling in silent circles, eyes closed, mouths stitched with threads of silence. Literally, someone tried to remove speech from this place. You move carefully, respectfully. The commander meets with the so-called prophet in a stone hall filled with melted candles and soot-blackened icons. The man is old, thin, barefoot. He doesn't speak in riddles, just facts. We were the kindling, he says. We built the pyre, and now we live in the smoke. You ask him what he means. He smiles sadly. You'll see. Later that night you find a journal tucked into a hollow in the wall. It isn't the prophet's, too old, dated decades before. The handwriting is neat, measured, almost too careful. It describes a dream, of a map, not of lands or cities, a map of choices, a way to leave the war, not by victory, not by death, but by remembering what came before it. You close the book and sit with it. The mountain air is thin, sharp in your lungs. You feel smaller here, but also strangely lighter. Historians still debate if such mountain sects truly existed, if soldiers ever found refuge in these silent orders, or if it was just legend, a comforting story for broken men who couldn't go home. You sit by the fire that night, and no one speaks, not from fear, but from choice, because for the first time in a long while, you don't need to say anything. The next morning, the army disbands. No trumpet, no farewell. Men leave in small groups, heading east, west, anywhere but back. The commander burns his banner. You watch the flames climb and feel nothing but relief. You stay a few more days, help rebuild the garden, sharpen tools, plant roots perhaps. Eventually, you leave too, not with fanfare, just a quiet goodbye. You don't take the sword. You take the journal. You descend the mountain with slow steps, the path winding behind you like an unspooled memory. And you walk, not toward war, but toward whatever's next. Because some part of you finally understands. The war wasn't the story. You were. And now here you are, beneath warm blankets or beneath starlight, wherever you've chosen to listen from. The tale is behind us now. The clang of swords, the weight of armor, the whispered fears of haunted forests and crumbling cities, all gently fading into the hush of this final breath. The wind still brushes softly through the monastery's gardens. The fire still crackles beneath soot-blackened icons. And somewhere, a lone soldier, perhaps you, steps off the road for the last time and sets down their burden. Because even in the harshest of times, even among curses and madness and forgotten gods, there is one quiet truth. You endured. You bore witness. You came through not unchanged, but still walking. Let the echoes of the war fade now. Let the rusting banners fall silent in your memory. Let the strange sacred map fold itself into dreams you no longer chase. Instead, just rest. Let your breathing slow. Let your body melt into the safety of sleep. You're far from the battlefield now. You've laid down your sword. You've earned this moment of stillness, this soft unraveling. And if, by some small chance, you dream again of the monastery, of the map, of the war that bent time around it, just remember, you're the one who walked away. End of script. Sweet dreams.